Welcome to World of Antiquity Live. How's everybody doing today? Can you see me all right? Can you hear me all right? I'm not getting a response. Are people seeing me? Ah, yes. Okay, great. Sorry, everybody. I wasn't sure if you saw me. Okay, well, welcome to World of Antiquity Live. This is where you get to see me, warts and all. I make mistakes live. I don't have any notes. I could say anything. I could really embarrass myself today. Who knows? And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to answer some of your questions for about a half an hour. We'll just gab it up, talk a little bit. I welcome your super chats. I'm getting an error message on the studio. I hope you still can see me. But sound and image good? Okay. Yeah, you like my new border? You like the border I made on here? Pretty cool. Give me some questions. Super chats are welcome because they help the channel, and I do appreciate them. And you'll get noticed better if you do a super chat. So a little bit later, we're going to have Flint Dibble on. He's an archaeologist, and he goes to the University of Cardiff, I believe. And we're going to talk to him about Atlantis, archaeology, pseudoarchaeology, all that stuff. So it should be a lot of fun. So that'll be in about 28 minutes. Okay, we'll have him come on. Yeah. All right. So what do you want to talk about today? Hello, everyone. Hi there, Liliana. Yes, hello. Maiden, good to see you. Glenn is going to be the moderator today. He's, as he usually is. If he gives you a hard time, just let me know, and, I'll show him what's what. Hi, Ellie. Hi, Dr. Spock Arts. Hi, Frank, Dan, Spencer, Ken, good to see you. All right. So I'm working on a new video that you might like. Now, I don't even know if you're going to like it. I just thought it was an interesting topic. But I wanted to share with you a video because I didn't see one on this topic anywhere. And that is the world's 10 oldest cities. Actually, I don't mean oldest cities because I don't mean cities that are still inhabited. I mean the earliest cities in the world that we know of. Right? And a lot of people don't know. You might have heard of one or two of them. But these are cities that there's no older city. And of course, we'll discuss what a city is because we have to figure that out first. But it should be an interesting video, and I'm going to have that done hopefully soon. And also, I've got 2 new artifacts videos coming out. And one of them is on the unfinished obelisk at Aswan. I know people have been asking me to do something on that. Well, I've got someone from Egypt that's going to talk with me about the unfinished obelisk, so that's going to be fun. And then I got another one on the sword of Gojan, which is a sword from ancient times from China, and it's still, from what I understand, very sharp. But we're going to talk about that one too in another artifacts video. Yeah, Frank, it's a nice border. I'm sure I'll like any video you make. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Frank. Uruk, Johnny, yes, that is on the list. Uruk is on the list. Any ancient city news is cool with me. All right. Logan, first timer? Well, welcome. We're very glad to have you here today. Have you ever collected Roman coins? Matthew, no, I have not collected coins of any type, but it is a worthy hobby. Ellie, I was wondering what your take on the so-called cocaine mummies is. Well, I had actually considered doing a video on it, Ellie, but there isn't a whole lot of info. With science, you have to replicate the experiments. But with that particular case, one study was done. No one is able to replicate it, so it's still kind of up in the air. We still don't know. Was there some kind of contamination in the lab? some people think that. We're not sure. So it is an interesting topic, but the jury's still out on that one. Yeah. Oh, Kenny, yes, I am gonna. Well, I'm gonna mention that the Cucuteni Trypillian stuff in the list, but well, there's more on that because there's some question as to whether we're really talking about cities there or not. The gold sword, is that the bronze sword? Well, you'll hear more about the sword of Gojan coming up. I can't give away too much here, but yeah. Ancient city news kind of sounds oxymoronic, but I get what you mean. Not necessarily, Glenn. We got a super chat. Thank you so much, John. $10, good stuff. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. Yes. So could you make more videos? Oh, let's go up a little bit. I saw your short video on this girl on Atlantis and laughed so hard. You're hilarious. Oh yeah, my 1 minute videos. By the way, on those 1 minute videos, they're just supposed to be silly and fun. Some people get so mad about them, and they're mad that it isn't a documentary. But I do documentaries too, but those are elsewhere. They're my longer videos. But the short videos are just for fun. They're just for some laughs. I don't even know if I'm that funny, but people seem to like them. Yeah. Let's see, what else we got here? Sir, do you believe in out of India theory? No, I do not. I actually have a couple videos on that. I did did Civilization Begin in India. There's 2 videos I did on that, and then I did one on genetic studies about when did Sanskrit appear. So I'm not a fan of out of India, and in fact, it's hard to find any historian or archaeologist who is. There are a couple in India who are, but most people do not subscribe to that one. What do you think of Mike McCulloch and his theories on ancient cities? Maiden, I'm not sure who you're talking about. Anyway, I'm not familiar, I guess is my answer. At a local flea market, a guy had a stall with ancient artifacts that I found interesting. Turns out he was a serial killer, which shocked me. Oh, really? Are you serious, Ken? Wow, that's quite the story. People are saying they do think my shorts are funny. It's hard to be funny every time, and it's hard to find a video that you can be funny too. So it's a challenge, but they are easier to make because they're only 1 minute. Who started the whole Atlantis is a key to the prehistoric world craze? Well, check out my video on Ignatius Donnelly. He might be a candidate for that. Okay, comments are coming in fast. I love the 1 minute videos. Yeah. Brahman started with Abraham sending his consent east with doctrines and writing. I don't know what that means. I actually only got through the first 30 seconds, but kept stopping because I was laughing too hard and it was late at night. You couldn't finish, Logan, a 1 minute video because you were laughing too? Now that's a compliment. Why are the Sumerian gods the same as the Assyrian deities? I think you mean deities. Well, they're all in Mesopotamia, and it's not so much that they're the exact same gods. What happens is very similar when we have the Greeks and the Romans. When the Sumerians and Assyrians meet each other, a lot of times they equate their gods. So our god so-and-so is kind of like your god so-and-so. And then they start sharing their stories, and then they become more alike because of they're influencing each other. Would you be willing to do those shorter videos as normal videos? Still the same length, but not using the shorts format. Well, if it's the same length, then it is a short, right? I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about, William. I'm traveling around Europe right now. Any ancient sites I should... Well, there's a ton. Where in Europe are you traveling, Matthew? I'll send you some info on McCulloch. Okay, sounds good. His name was Bob Burdell, and that's the serial killer. Yes, thank you, Ken. What do you think about Edgar Cayce and Atlantis? Well, he was... All of his information didn't come from archaeology. It came from his psychic abilities, supposedly. So I'm a little skeptical about that. We have another super chat. Thank you, Sobek. Appreciate the $2. Thoughts on Paul and relation to mystery cults. You mean the Apostle Paul, I'm assuming? I do know that early Christianity was thought by some Romans to be a mystery cult. It had some of the features, but I don't think it fits all the categories, that you would have for a mystery cult. It wasn't all that secretive, really. Frank, thank you for the super chat. Much appreciated. I've actually got a possibly controversial topic, regarding religious literature as historical documents. Not with regard to the supernatural parts, of course, but the rest. Okay, well, I'll be interested in hearing that. Are we aware of any theories, evidence-based, that indicate natural global events impacting ancient human history? Impacted ancient human history? For example, volcanic eruptions, impacting global crop yields, leading to famine, migration, war. We have to some, like the most famous, of course, would be something like the Thera eruption in the 17th century BCE, which caused a massive disruption. Pompeii, of course, to an extent as well. But there have been. Now, I'm not a prehistorian, so the prehistoric stuff I don't know as much about in that regard. I think she means in landscape mode. Oh, the shorts in landscape mode. Well, I'll think about it. I'm not sure about that. Welcome, Albert. Good to have you here. Howdy. Is Meluha referred to Indus Valley civilization? Yes, Meluha is the Mesopotamian word for the Indus Valley civilization. And maybe it's close to what the word was. We're not sure. But for now, we call it the IVC until we can actually decipher their writings, and then maybe we'll find out the name. I'm traveling all over Europe. Maybe a site around Spain or France. Well, that's something I have to think about, Matthew. And there are all kinds of ancient sites in Spain and France. Michael, thank you for the super chat. Found your channel. Deep immersion got me through a boring week. Oh, great. I'm glad to hear that. Do you think there are any hidden pyramids in the Amazon jungles? Maybe. When you say pyramids, maybe temple structures, buildings that are bigger on the bottom than on the top. Not any true pyramids, most likely, but you never know. There's always something more to be discovered, right? So you just never know. Is Abhijit Chavda biased? I think so. Well, actually, he says he is. He even said he was. So he answers his own question. Do you look at the Quran and the Bible as a source that helps in archaeology? Historians look at the Quran, the Bible, every single ancient document exactly the same way. They use the consistent principles to, use them for historical value. So it depends on when the actual document was written and who was there, how they knew, all those questions you ask for any document, including the Quran and the Bible. Restapopoulos. Did I say that right? Restapopoulos? Thank you so much. I appreciate the super chat. Very helpful. Do you have a video on the Inca stone structures? It just went off the screen. Sacsayhuaman I have. But Inca is, of course, out of my time period because it's later. But people are always asking me about the Inca. Maybe I'll do more in the future. We'll see. Recently saw your video on dating the pyramids. It was absolutely fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate it. I was hoping people would like it. I want to do more. I don't know if people know this, but my speciality is on dating things. I'm not taking them on dates, of course. I got so many of those jokes, by the way, on that video. On chronology. That's my thing. So maybe I'll do more videos on finding out when things came from, right? There was a James Cameron-produced documentary about Exodus that equated the 10 plagues to the Theran volcanic. Yes, I have heard of that theory before. What are my thoughts on it? Well, this kind of goes with everything. When people take stories from any book and try to give it a scientific interpretation, I'm wondering if they're taking the story as it was meant to be taken, right? We love to impose science on everything. They do this with Atlantis. They do this with, all kinds of stories. But I'm a little bit hesitant to do that because I'm not so sure that that's what the story was meant to be, how the story was meant to be taken, Frank, specifically, how does one parse a religious text for historically reliable information? What's the process? particularly when there's little external corroboration. If there is no external corroboration, Frank, then you do it like any other document that you don't have external corroboration for. You just say, it's a working hypothesis that perhaps this happened. There are different kinds of historians, different kinds of approaches. Some historians take a legendary text or Atlantis or whatever you want to, Troy, whatever, and they say, I'm going to use this as a working hypothesis and try to see if I can find some history behind it. But others are like, I believe nothing. I believe nothing until we have proof, And I'm not of that latter type, but there are people like that. Blank slate, we don't believe anything until we can prove it. Well, we can't actually prove anything. We can only have sufficient evidence for it. But I'm more of the type that, let's use this as a working hypothesis. Maybe this happened. Maybe we can verify some of it. So I kind of take that approach myself. I initially came across your channel as a rebuttal to the channel Uncharted X that I was a fan of until I saw how much you tore apart his videos. Has he ever done a rebuttal to your videos on him? No. I mean, he'll do videos and then maybe address some points that maybe I or someone else have said, but he has never directly done so, no. No one has except for Martin Sweatman. I think he's the only one that ever made a response video to me. Can you recommend any documentaries other than your own that a novice needs to watch? Well, on what subject, Johnny? There's so many documentaries. Give me a subject. Although I'm not really a documentary, aficionado, but when you're doing a video on end of topic, how much of it is straight from your brain, and how much do you have to go and look stuff up? I always research. So when I do like a Q&A video or any video, I research. In fact, I learn a lot by preparing videos. Oh, I didn't know that before. So yeah, I do a lot of research. I don't want you to think that I'm just so great at just off the cuff, remembering all these names and dates and everything, because I remember some things, but not a lot. Have you ever looked at Bright Insight? Yes, I've done 3 videos on Bright Insight, Husk, so check them out. On the reset structure, yes. You ruined quasi-pseudo nutball history for me. Sorry, Jimmer. That's kind of what I'm doing here, I guess. Would you ever have a millennial mom as a guest? Oh, millennial mom, the TikToker? Oh, I don't know. Maybe. I've been kind of wondering whether I should have people on who are not historians or archaeologists and who are pseudo-historians or whatever. I still don't know whether I should bring them on the platform or not. I've kind of had a policy so far of only having professionals come on. But I'll think about it. What is the oldest written language in the Americas? I believe it would be... There's still some debate about it a little bit, but I think the Olmecs probably on that one. Okay, let's see. There's so many coming through. Is it possible that the Indo-Aryans who brought Sanskrit to India adopted some of the Harappan language into Sanskrit? Well, first of all, Sam, I think that Sanskrit was developed in India, so it would be the parent language of Sanskrit that they would have brought into India. And maybe Sanskrit itself could have some, it probably does have some influence from local languages, including maybe the language of the Harappans. That I could see that. Let's see. What is your range of specialization again? 500 CE back to how far? Yeah, Göbekli Tepe's not in my range, Michael. So I'm going from basically the rise of cities. So maybe around 4000 BCE up until about 600 CE. That's kind of my range. And I originally started, I was just being focused on the ancient Near East, but I've become kind of a generalist, so I do world history in that period. Are you familiar with the series America Unearthed? I've heard of it, but I have not watched any episodes, I don't believe. Do you think Atlantis was possibly real? We'll talk about that in a minute when I bring in Flint Dibble, Mr. Welshman, and we'll talk about it then, and I think you'll enjoy it. As a matter of fact, let's see, we've got 10 more minutes before I bring him in. What's your take of the status of Egyptian chronology with regards to David Rohl? You know what? I used to be a fan of David Rohl back in the early days before I went to my PhD program and all that. And I have a couple of his books on the shelf, but I no longer subscribe to that. it kind of goes all back to Velikovsky and kind of rewriting. Well, is it Velikovsky? There's a few different morphing, what do you call it? A few different branches of this idea, but of redoing the whole chronology of Egypt or other cultures, and I just don't think the evidence is there for it. Maybe I should have David Roll on sometime. Roman mythology was heavily influenced by Greek mythology, right? Romans' own deities are so obscure. Do you know a good source where I can find out more about them? I'm not sure about a good book on it. I'd have to look, Diana. I might be able to find something, but not off the top of my head. But Roman gods existed already. And then when they met the Greeks, there was a mixing going on, especially Greek influencing Romans. However, I should also add that the Romans and the Greeks had common ancestors, so there also could have been some similarities already. The problem with pseudo-historians is that they will just throw misused facts that can't be easily rebuked live. That does happen. I kind of want to have a live discussion with somebody like this, but preferably on another platform. Like I'd love to do on Modern Day Debates, you know, that channel. It'd be fun to do something. And the moderator of Modern Day Debates said he's open to the idea, but I haven't been able to find anyone who will debate me on there. So, Brad, thank you very much for the super chat. Found your channel about 4 months ago. I really enjoyed your debunking videos. Thank you, Brad. It warms my heart to hear you say that. I'm hoping that I do some good in this, that I've changed some minds. That's kind of what I'm going for, you know, changing some minds. Egyptian Old Dynasty documentaries, any recommendations? You were asking for, video documentaries on, I'd have to think. There are some YouTube channels, you know, my friend History with Sai has been doing the Old Kingdom dynasties recently, but I haven't watched them all, so he's usually very good at researching things. But he's not a historian per se, but he does a good job. Is the Vatican's library really off limits to scholars? No, it is not. This is a myth. It's off limits to the general public, yes. But if you are a scholar, you can just apply, and they usually let you to do some research if you need to do research in there. I lived in Atlantis in a past life. Yeah, sure you did. What lost great writings that we know existed do you hope are found? Well, I did a video on that, Buzz. Check it out. Lost Ancient Histories. When are you going on to Joe Rogan to really hit back? Well, you know what? I wrote into Joe Rogan. Haven't heard anything back. It was right after Jimmy Corsetti was on, and I'm like, do you want to hear another opinion? But they never got back to me. So, Martin Sweatman, I'll look into his rebuttal to you. I saw your Twitter thread with him and Rob Heatherly, in which he posted an unfortunate picture of you. Oh, did he? Yeah, well, he also blocked me, so I can't see anything that he's got up there anymore. Did Dr. Gustav Solomon Oppert say gunpowder was invented in India? I don't know the answer to that question, Samit. It's a little bit after my time, of course. You think the city of Ubar, or known as Iram, as well as pure legend, are worth looking into? I don't know a lot about it, Mattheos, I'm sorry to say. I'll look into it. Roman Mars is a way nicer deity than Hellenic Ares. Oh, maybe, Frank. Incidentally, apparently modern day debates may be platforming Nazis now, so I'd look into that before doing anything there. Yeah, I'll have to look into it. I do know that, I mean, I am for free and open discussion, but of course, I'm always wary about, in a debate, if someone has bad ideas and they come off looking better because they're just a good debater, it could have some damaging effects. Could you make a video discussing foreign relations of ancient India before the Achaemenid Empire? Yes, maybe I could. Sure. The problem is anyone can make a YouTube video and claim in it anything they want. Yes, that's true, Paul. That is very true. And in fact, the people who say the most silly things are the ones that get all the attention. Why did Alexander not continue his campaign after he defeated Porus? Because his men were ready to mutiny. They didn't want to go any further. And he wanted to, but they were like, we're done, man. We're done. When are you going to be a man? What do you mean, Joseph? How would you like me to be a man, Joseph? Not with you, I hope. Anyway, until I found your channel, they had me hook, line, and sinker. My dumb, I guess your dumb ass was repeating some of that. I've since retracted my statements. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Is there any more lost ruins to find? If there is any more lost ruins to find, where would you look? Well, I guess I would look in the places that I'm the most interested in. So for me, I still love the Middle East, you know. But anywhere, I mean, yeah. And they're doing LiDAR a lot in Central America and South America, and they're finding things. So I'm excited to see what they're going to dig up over there. Would you be interested in going on Edward Dutton's show? I don't know who Edward Dutton is, Maiden. He's also an academic. Tell him, to invite me. I'll have to check out his channel. You are changing minds. Keep doing what you're doing. I personally have really enjoyed your debunking videos and share them regularly. Thank you very much, Brent. I'm gonna, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat here, but I'm gonna bring in Flint because it's getting to be about time, and he's probably signed into my Zoom. Let's see. We'll see if he's here. And then we'll bring him in to talk about archaeology in Atlantis. And if you have any questions for him, I will pose them to him if I see them, but I'll also be asking him questions. Okay, I'm admitting him now. Hey there, Flint. Are you there?
Hey, yeah, how's it going?
I see your face, but I do not hear you. You won't be able to see me, Flint.
Can you not hear me? It's working for me.
You're not muted? Because I can't hear you.
No, it tells me my audio is working.
Let's see if it changes if I do a little bit of this.
Hello, hello.
I'm going to capture the window. And then...
Definitely.
Your Zoom face is not showing up.
Oh. I'm not sure. Do you want me to...
You got your sound on though, right, Flint?
Yes. My sound
yeah, I guess try reconnecting. Maybe because you came in first.
Okay.
I'm not sure why. Of course, I have my headphones in, but I should be able to hear him. I think. Oh, you can hear... Oh, you all hear him? Oh! Oh, okay. I'm sorry, everybody. I should have paid attention to you.
Hello?
All right. I still can't hear him, but everybody else can hear you, Flint, even though I can't.
Okay, fair enough. I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I can hear you now. All
Okay,
right.
good.
It's not coming through my headphones. It's coming through my speakers. I hope that doesn't cause any trouble. But I'm not seeing you on my screen.
I'm not seeing you either.
You won't be able to. Yeah, you won't be able to see me. All right. I'm not going to do... For some reason, my window capture is giving me a white screen. Oh, that's because I have the wrong one in here. Oh, no. It's the right one. You're still a white screen on here.
Uh-oh.
Why? I can see you on my Zoom. Well, I could do it a different way. I can try it... Well, let me bring him... I'm going to bring him in, and I want you to tell me if you can see him, everybody, even if I can't, okay? So let's bring him in. And... Let's see. That's not working.
No, it looks like a white screen. I'm looking at the YouTube now.
Yeah, white screen. Okay. Let me... So they're getting sound but not video for some weird reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see me on your Zoom though, yeah?
I can see you on my Zoom, yes.
Okay.
But I can't see you on the screen. And I've done this before and it worked fine. So this is what I'm trying to figure out.
I've done the Zoom before, not the live YouTube part. So I cannot help you.
All right, so what I'm going to do, let's see. I always have these technical troubles, and it's embarrassing to me. Okay. So instead of window capture, maybe I should try a different way. Let's try it display capture. Maybe that will work. Ooh, okay. It's capturing my whole desktop.
It hasn't changed anything in YouTube at all.
Well, I'm doing it on the preview before I show everybody.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
Because I don't want to like bombard them with the. Okay. How about? Yeah, for some reason. All right, let me see if it's in Zoom that the problem is going on here. Doesn't look like it. All right, let's try the display capture one more time. Or window capture. Maybe window capture would work. Oh, that's what I was doing already.
Leave again.
I got it. I got it. All right, yeah, I got it. So all I have to do is switch to this. And we're going to put this here. Oh, was that the... Yeah, we got to bring this up. Sorry about that. Flint, you can talk if you want. You can still talk.
Hi, everybody. I'm Flint. I'm an archaeologist, and I have a lot of respect here for Dr. Miano for his debunking. I am not as much of a debunker. I'm what you call more of just a dirt archaeologist. But as I'm sure we'll go into, I got a little involved in a roundabout way in debunking a bit of Atlantis. And the reason why I can focus on that story specifically is I focus on Greek archaeology. So I'm a classical archaeologist, and I've excavated sort of all over the Greek world, from Crete to the mainland to other islands. And I spend most of my time these days studying animal bones. So I look at food and what people were eating, and pets and horses. There's actually an exhibition, if you're in Athens right now, on the ancient Athenian horse. And one of the horse's skeletons who I studied is on display there. So look it up if you're in Athens sometime in the next month. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling while I'm waiting on you, David.
Oh, it's good. It's good. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think I got it. Okay.
Okay.
But
This is actually how Atlantis got destroyed. It was a technological thing. Much like the cryptocurrency crash, it was a Zoom crash connection to YouTube, and it just destroyed an entire civilization.
all right, everybody, can you see him? Can you see him?
No, it still looks the same. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Is it showing up?
Delayed. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
There we go. All right. This is only my third live stream. I'm still getting used to the OBS system. Okay. So, this is Flint Dibble, everybody. Flint Dibble.
Hey,
Yes.
how's it going, everyone?
Now, you might be you're in Cardiff, is that right, Flint?
Yeah, I'm in Cardiff.
But you don't sound Welsh to me.
I'm not Welsh. I'm from the U.S. I was born in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, and mostly grew up in Philly.
Is it true that you are the son of the archaeologist Harold Dibble?
Yes, my dad was an archaeologist who studied stone tools. So he studied stone tools made by Neanderthals, and he dug all over France. And he named me Flint after the stone, and he named my brother Chip because you chipped the stone tools to make them.
Well, my dad was in a rock band, and my middle name is Ringo. Yeah, so there you go.
You know, my dad, he claimed that his biggest claim to fame besides archaeology, he had a choice about whether to do a rock band or archaeology, and in the little tiny town of Tombstone, Arizona, his band beat the Beatles on the charts for one day.
Ooh, nice. So you got interested in archaeology because of him, I take it?
Well, actually, no. I wanted to not do it at all. And then I realized I like to travel. So I sort of grew up on digs going to France, and I realized I really like to travel. And so I wanted to get away from like what he did, and that's why I focus on the classical Mediterranean, because if I in the States, archaeology is divided between anthropology and classics often, and so I could move into a classics department and not have to deal with his shadow. Let's say,
Ah, okay.
yeah, yeah.
And are you happy with your decision?
Yeah, yeah. I have worked in Greece now since what 2007, and I love it here. Let's say, and I still bring a lot of what I learned from my dad. I mean, I have a lot of respect for what he did, and he passed away a few years ago, so he's very much missed. So I bring that approach to the classical world through what I do,
Mm-hmm.
trying to take a historical period, let's say, and think about it in some ways that a sort of a prehistoric approach might be, which is why I focused on animal bones, because they've been something that people have largely ignored because they have this lovely temples and sculpture and art in the ancient Greek world, and so I've been trying to show that you can tell real good stories from things like animal bones.
What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about archaeologists in the wider world?
Huh.
The general public, do they have these ideas about archaeologists that that you think are misconceptions?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of them actually. I think the idea that we're all trying to solve mysteries is something that I think is big. You see this all over the internet or TV or things like that. There's this idea that archaeologists are trying to solve some sort of grand mystery, when in fact, to be honest, most of what we're trying to do is make sense of how these stones line up or these potsherds line up in some dirt. And so we're mostly looking at everyday life. We're trying to move from the archaeology of 100 years ago, looking at really wealthy people and monuments and grand art, to trying to look at how people were living like you and me in the past,
Mm-hmm.
everybody. And I think that's the big shift. And people don't recognize that because they still think it's about these big, big things.
Yeah. Do you think there is more? Well, I shouldn't say more value. Do you think that there is that the shift is a good thing? That there's more focus on the little people.
Yeah, I think A, it gives us a lot more different kinds of questions to ask. And B, I think it's grounded a little better in the multitude of evidence we have. I mean, when you go dig, what you really spend most of your time with, it depends on the period I suppose you're in, but it's either dirt, stone tools, and animal bones, or it's dirt, potsherds, and animal bones. And then maybe some architecture, right?
Yeah.
And that's like the majority of what you have. And so we're now finally at the point, in the last 30, 40, 50 years where that's what we're focusing most of our time on. We're actually, and this is important because when you dig, you're destroying stuff. Once you dig something up, nobody else can go back and dig that up again. And so you're destroying the relationship between things, you're exposing stuff to the elements. And so focusing on that everyday stuff is actually doing justice to the record that as we find it.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's really valuable to do that.
Now, I know that you and I and a few others are, we regularly engage with popular pseudoarchaeology or just popular, ancient history or whatever. In the past, traditionally, scholars, archaeologists, historians, and so forth, they kind of just ignored it, right? They're just like, it's silly, ridiculous. We're just going to ignore it. We're going to do our thing. We'll make our views known in academic journals and so forth. But I think you're one of the people, like me, that think that it is necessary to engage publicly with some of the stuff because it's spreading. It seems to be spreading.
Yeah. This was something that took me some time to wrap my head around. I used to be just like anyone else and joke about ancient aliens or Atlantis or these different kinds of pseudo-archaeological things, whether it was online or with my friends. And it slowly started hitting me that this stuff is increasing in popularity. And so that it's what dominates TV shows now. You go on the History Channel, and Ancient Aliens is one of their most popular TV shows. And it's what dominates YouTube culture. And this is a problem. I mean, people are ignoring what real archaeology is and approaching towards this because this is something that's accessible. And so I think I take a slightly different approach than some of you guys, where my main focus online is to really just share the ordinary stuff and how cool it is. But at the same time, I do think it's important to speak up. And I think that what all you all have been doing is very valuable on that. And I want to add my voice to it when I can. And so the reason why is just because of how popular it is. And so I think the real goal we need to have, though, is to really move people from thinking, all right, there's these grand things like aliens or Atlantis, and get them to see what we're really doing. Because what we're really doing these days is so much more interesting than what archaeology used to be. We can tell stories from the ancient world that we couldn't 50 years ago. It's just phenomenal, the kind of detail and resolution we can get into ordinary people's lives, but also just really weird things. And so I think we need to just keep hammering at that. And I try to, like you, constantly go to my colleagues and say we need to keep gearing towards the general public, because if not, we're going to lose them. And what we do is really interesting, and it is interesting in and of itself. And we need to start sharing that more boldly, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, on Twitter a few months back, I noticed that you put a thread up about Atlantis. And it was interesting because I've done a few videos already where I address the Atlantis story, Plato's Atlantis story. And but you had a take that was different than some of the things that I said, and I thought it'd be worth discussing. And it had to do with the fact, well, some people, you'll hear them say online, but Critias himself says, this story is true. This story's true, right? But you are of the opinion that the books Critias and Timaeus are explicit that they're not true.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. If it depends on whether you take the story and you take a few quotes out of it, or whether you read it from start to finish. And so anybody that wants to approach this story needs to look at how it's set up. And the setup is quite clear. It takes place fictionally the day after the discussion of Plato's Republic. And so they summarize the discussion they had yesterday about the Republic and how they developed philosophically in a dialogue this ideal city. And Socrates sort of sits down and says to like Critias and Timaeus and Hermocrates, and he's like, it's kind of cool. We came up with this cool city, but I want to see more. I want to see this ideal city that we sort of created. I want to see it in action. I want to see how it performs in war. And so that's what leads off the whole thing. And then throughout, Critias, he does both things. He says, all right, we're setting this up as like a true story that I heard, but at the same time, please give me some leniency. He says this like 3 times. Mm-hmm. Give me leniency for all the things that I get wrong. Because it's just like a painter. A painter might paint this kind of imaginary landscape and everybody says, oh, that's great. But as soon as a painter tries to paint a real scene, a real person, then everybody starts critiquing them. And so he says, I need leniency, just like with that painter. And so from start to finish, you can see them playing with this idea. They start by saying, we're going to take this ideal city and see what happens. And they say, well, we're going to take this ideal city and we're going to pretend that it's Athens. And then we're going to have it fight against this other nation that we're going to call Atlantis. And then we're going to create this history around this war. And so that's how it happens. And so there's actually some really good writing on this. Johansson has this article. What's it called exactly? It's called Truth, Lies, and History in Plato's Timaeus Critias, where he sort of plays around with how they create this tongue-in-cheek history. But if you do need to read it from start to finish to see how they set it up is very clearly a philosophical story. It's not even a fiction per se. It's meant to be a story about how this philosophical city can perform.
Yeah, I think Socrates in it even calls it entertainment, right? He's like, entertain me, fellas.
Yeah, that's what he wants.
Timaeus, Critias, Hermocrates, entertain me with your stories, Yeah. Yeah, and I heard. I mean, I understand it was going to be a trilogy, and maybe he never finished the 3rd book. So,
in fact, the Critias was never finished. It just ends abruptly, randomly. So it's meant to be this 3-part dialogue, And the first part is the Timaeus. And so they set it up in the Timaeus. And then Timaeus goes and sort of does this. It's like physics. He sort of goes through the physics, what we would call physics today, of the natural world. And it's funny because you can't take this as like the truth of how everybody in the ancient world saw the natural world. There was a lot of debate over this stuff that was discussed in the Timaeus, for example. And then the next part is supposed to be more of like a historical picture. How do these ideal cities that were created, Athens, which is meant to be the republic, and then Atlantis, which is meant to be the adversary. And that actually only gets like a third of the way in, and then it just randomly, abruptly ends. And then there was supposed to be a third one, which is Hermocrates, and he's supposed to be discussing aspects of I think, politicians and how they're supposed to act. And so that doesn't exist at all. And so we don't know why the Critias just ends abruptly. We don't know, we don't have, for example, all of Plato. So maybe some of this stuff was written and lost to us. Some of it maybe was never finished. There's a lot of debate over why it's cut off in the middle and what was intended or what's missing and things like that.
Yeah. How do you feel in general about the idea of myths and legends carrying some kind of historical kernel of truth in them? Not Plato, because Plato's a philosophy, but I mean, there, whether it be Troy or something else, is it a worthwhile endeavor? People don't seem to do it as much as they used to try to find the history within the stories.
Actually, people do this all the time. So I think that, yeah, and I'm actually intrigued on the Plato thing. We can get back to that in a second. So Plato definitely is philosophy. It's not myth, and so therefore we need to treat it differently. And so if you look at, say, the Iliad and the Odyssey, which is, purportedly written down by Homer, but what we really know about it is that it's an oral poem that develops over hundreds and hundreds of years. And what's really cool is you can start to look at the material culture, the artifacts that are described in the Iliad and the Odyssey in these poems. And you can actually see like clear descriptions of a spear, right? And a shield. And sometimes that spear or shield, it matches a Bronze Age spear or shield. And at other times, in later parts, it actually matches more closely an Iron Age spear or shield. And this helps us show the development of this oral poem over centuries. Different parts of it were composed in different periods, and but it's not like you can excavate the poem. So there's an example where the spear in one person's hand actually changes within 2 lines, from looking like a Bronze Age style spear to like an Iron Age spear from hundreds of years later. And so we can definitely start to identify sort of material culture that has an influence and is recognizable in these myths. Another good example that I like, since I study animal remains, is the boar's tusk helmet. So the boar's tusk helmet is a really common, not super common, but it shows up in a lot of Bronze Age graves where they take these kind of male pigs, their canine teeth are the tusks, and they saw them up and sew them together into a helmet. And so we have plenty of these archaeological examples, and these are described in a lot of detail in the Iliad. And so it certainly, we can find these connections without a doubt. And we do need to be careful, though, because, of course, for myth, this is something that develops over such a long period of time, hundreds of years. It's amalgamating culture, interests, and stories all into one, what we think of as one story. But in fact, it's reflecting things over hundreds and hundreds of years in a variety of different places, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, do you think that in Plato there is any kind of historical kernel of truth to the Atlantis story?
Not with Atlantis per se. What I like to do as an archaeologist, so one of the big projects that I'm involved in is actually here in Athens. I study animal remains from the Athenian Agora, so just right down there below the Acropolis where we're looking at.
It's amazing that you could be sitting right in front of it here.
Exactly. It's pretty phenomenal, the way I can just beam myself in. And so any archaeologist, what we like to do if we're going to follow a scientific methodology when we're excavating or when we're analyzing materials, we kind of go from known to unknown. So let's just take that analogy for a second, where we are excavating in a space, right? And so we do some survey, we walk over it, we find maybe a bit of wall sticking up, and then that's where we start excavating because we know something is there, or maybe a concentration of pottery sherds, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we start investigating the unknown by going further down and further out. Okay, we can take that analogy also to say how we study material. So now I have a new assemblage of animal bones or potsherds or stone tools. I take studies that other people have done of similar material, and I develop hypotheses for questions I can look at in this unknown material, right? So I'm always constantly making this analogy from known to unknown. And we can actually do that in this Atlantis story that Plato records for us, because the Republic, the ideal city that is fighting against Atlantis in this story, is Athens. And so we actually know quite a bit about the archaeology and history of Athens. It's something that archaeologists have been investigating for hundreds of years. We have a lot of really high quality publications. Much of it is open access and available on the internet for really anyone to go look at. The archives of the Athenian Agora, which stretch back 80 years, or plentiful stuff on the Acropolis or the Keramikos by the German Institute. All this stuff is available. And so we can start to compare that to Plato's description. And this is where it pretty much falls apart. Plato's description of Athens doesn't match a picture of Athens in any period at all. So he sort of describes Critias in the Critias and the Timaeus, describes it as this story taking place 9,000 years before Solon. Solon's around 600 BCE. So that would be 9600 BCE is when this war between Athens and Atlantis took place. There's not a single bit of archaeology from Athens at that time. Okay.
When was the foundation of the village there? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah. So in the Neolithic period, and that's actually how I got involved in this. There was a show that was on the Discovery Channel called Hunting Atlantis, and the host of the show had this idea, maybe we should redate when Atlantis is, not 9600 BCE. There's no cities in 9600 BCE. That makes no sense. So let's use Egyptian king lists and make it into about the 4th, 5th millennium BC, so the Neolithic period, right?
One second. I have to acknowledge my super chats from time to time, and so our dying son, thank you so much. I'm going to save your question for a little bit later because we're right in the middle of something else, but I'll come back to it for sure. But thank you for the super chat.
Okay, so yeah, so if you think about it, if you could place this war, say, in the Neolithic period, right when Athens is first established. And the thing is there's this description of Athens as if there's like grand buildings and huge fortification walls, and it's a grand city that protects the rest of this league of area in the Mediterranean, Europe, the Near East, that area, against these Atlantis invaders. But Athens at the time is just, what do we have? We have like 10 wells full of pottery sherds and animal bones and a couple terracotta figurines and one little fragment of a marble figurine, and that's it. So Athens doesn't match that. Another time period you could think of is sort of in the late Bronze Age. And that's when people think that perhaps Atlantis is a reflection of
the Thera eruption and the Minoans and all that.
The Thera eruption and that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And so you look at this, and again, the thing is that what Plato describes, he describes this temple to Athena. Not this one. This is the Parthenon. Right here are these ruins. Right here, you can barely make them out. If you go on Google Earth and you zoom in on the Acropolis, you can actually see them really clearly. It's the ruins of the earlier Athena temple that were destroyed by the Persians when the Persians invaded. And so he describes that as part of the city. And so that really means that if that's part of the city at the time when Atlantis invades, then basically Atlantis is the Persians, right? It's the only time frame that fits. And he describes, in a sense, this not mythical, that's a bad way to put it, this early Athens, let's say. He describes three things that we know that existed. One is that ruins of the Athena temple. Two is the fortification that goes around the Acropolis. And then three is this kind of spring right here that was, and all these things were renovated during his life. So he saw these things. They were all built at completely different times. None of them were around at the same time. And then they were all renovated and visible during his life. And
so he's just projecting into the past, basically.
He's projecting basically during his life. They're building these monuments you can see here. So when he's writing this, these are all completed, but he was around, Socrates and him were around when these things were being built. And so that stuff was then being exposed. So you can't actually see the Mycenaean Acropolis wall, but it's right behind this big wall right here. You can see through it if there's a few stones that are missing. And so that's how we can find it. And you can actually climb down. My finger's not doing well. From right here at the top, there's like a little thing. I've gone down there, and you can see it from inside as well. And so he takes those three things, but then everything else he just gets completely wrong. All his other descriptions he describes, for example, and some of it he proves himself wrong if you're trying to take it literally. So he describes, you know how Atlantis is supposedly destroyed in a natural disaster? So he describes geological and environmental changes to Athens and its surrounding territory over thousands of years. He describes, for example, rains that cause all this erosion and sort of earthquakes that change the landscape. And he, for example, describes how the Acropolis, this rocky outcrop, right, back at the time of this Atlantis story, was 5 times the size. In fact, it projected out to this. There's this hill off in the background that's called Lykavitos. And it was that hill right here, Lykavitos, which has a great church on it, by the way, today. It was part of the same outcrop as the Acropolis, according to Plato at that time. We know that to be geologically absolutely untrue. We have wells going back thousands of years. We have a sense of the geology of Athens and the way that the landscape had changed over time. And we also know that when this earlier Acropolis wall, the Bronze Age one, surrounded the Acropolis, it matched the same Acropolis. It had not eroded since then. And so he can't be describing this Acropolis wall as Bronze Age and then saying it would be around a bigger Acropolis that didn't exist at the same time. So he actually sort of proves himself wrong in that sense.
Well, the weird thing, I just got a message that the Zoom meeting will end in 10 minutes. I thought with 2 people I could do unlimited, but I don't know. So if you get cut out, I'm going to have to send you a new link.
Okay, I'll look for it.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
This is a little off topic, but I do want to address the super chat question. The super chat questions that come in, by the way, everybody, I will pose to Flint, and then we will answer them together. What is a discovery that would rewrite history? So I think he's talking about something major that would have to be found that would rewrite it, because every discovery rewrites history, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually say we're always rewriting history. And that's actually what makes this field so vibrant. So I asked David, for example, to share a link to the video. I was part of, you could think about big history. I was part of this excavation, 7 years ago at the Palace of Nestor at Pylos, where we surprisingly uncovered this monumentally wealthy grave that was since named by the project directors the Tomb of the Griffin Warrior. And so that really started rewriting history in terms of what early Pylos looked like, because we never had such wealth from there. And it also started rewriting the history of the connection between the Mycenaean mainland and the Minoans on the island of Crete. And so you can think about a big find. These big finds actually still happen all the time, all over the world. So much archaeology is going on that we're constantly finding some really cool new stuff. Mm-hmm. 2, we're always constantly rewriting history by taking a second eye on things. So one of the things that I've been looking into is the relationship, for example, between the archaeological and the textual record. And, it's funny, you see me doing this, for example, with Plato and Atlantis. I like to look at how people describe archaeology, in a sense, in their textual sources. And it's one thing that I can do on a more rigorous level than just sort of anecdotes by saying, oh, there's this one thing, the Acropolis wall, right? That's just anecdotal evidence. But on a more sort of statistical, big data level, animals are the best thing for this. And so because we have a whole lot of animal bones and teeth, I have gone through hundreds of thousands of specimens. And then we have ancient authors talk a lot about animals. They sacrifice them, they have them as pets, they ride horses. And so I can start doing a big data statistical comparison of this to get a sense of what's the difference between the textual and archaeological record. And I have a secret for everybody, and I've not finished publishing all this yet, though I've started presenting it. I have a conference paper on my YouTube on this. Ancient authors, they like to exaggerate is maybe the best way to put it. They told those little lies that we all tell ourselves. So when talking about animals, they focus on the wealthier, bigger animals, horses, cows. That's what they like to talk about. But in the animal bone evidence, it's dominated by sheep and goat and pig and
Yeah.
smaller things. And so I like to compare that to Facebook. We like to post, a grander version of ourselves on social media than what the reality is. If you're going to share a meal, you're going to share something that's really good and looks nice, not like your everyday crappy breakfast. And same thing, there's a lot of studies of this today where you sort of look at what people do and then you compare to what even they say themselves. Like we lie to ourselves. There's this thing called the Tucson Trash Project that went door to door, and it kind of interrogated people and said, can I look into your trash? And by the way, can you take an anonymous survey on what you're throwing out? And it turns out that, and people have no reason to lie, it's all anonymous and everything. Turns out people drink more than they claim they do. They eat less healthy food than they claim they do. They eat more junk food than they claim they do. And this took place back in the 70s, so they consume more pornography than they claim they do. And so we all lie to ourselves a little bit. And so it's certainly true when you look at ancient textual sources that they did the same thing. They, made themselves seem a little more grand and wealthy than they were.
I got a couple more questions here. This one's from Rob S. Thoughts on Diodorus's version of the story? Seems to be completely different, but there's some interesting connections.
I've not read that in a while. Most scholars are fairly convinced, from what I've read, that every other version in the ancient world is a derivative of Plato.
Yeah, that Diodorus knew of Plato's version, and
yeah, exactly. And
riffing
so
on it,
that's certainly what Waterfield says in his translation of stuff, and so that's what I've always taken it as. But I have not gone through and interrogated it in the same way. I suppose I have to at some point. I know some people like to find connections in Herodotus, and they're just totally bogus. There is no direct discussion of Atlantis or anything like that in Herodotus. There's no clear allusion to it or implication.
Yeah, they try to make a connection between the Atlas Mountains and the Atlantes who live there, and Atlantis.
But that's just all etymologies off of the hero Atlas, who holds the world, after which we get all these names. It's just all linguistics rather than history.
Thank you, by the way, Rob, for that super chat. Phil, also thank you for the super chat. Here's Phil's question. Why stretch the truth? Was Plato's goal entertainment, allegorical teaching, or propaganda?
Allegory. His entire goal is philosophy. So he's not a historian. He's not a mythographer. He's not even really an entertainer. I mean, I suppose to a certain degree, these kind of sophists had to be entertaining enough to get you to listen, just like public scholars, the same sort of thing. But his goal was to practice philosophy. So what he's doing is he created a very popular dialogue, The Republic, and so this was the sequel to it, where they could see how that ideal city performed in a historical situation, a war. And so they create, therefore, this circumstance. And, Atlantis was meant to be the opposite of this historical city. And so they create the Republic, and then they create Atlantis, and then they were supposed to go to war, but that part's missing, or it was never finished. So we never got that far.
I think in the story, right? Doesn't Critias say that the entire all the states in the Mediterranean region, led by Athens, fought against Atlantis and all of its vassals or whatever on the outside of the Pillars of Heracles?
But very offhand. Again, the war never actually got started because it's cut off so early. So they sort of set it up twice. So in the Timaeus, they do a brief summary of the whole story, let's say. Then in the Critias, they do a brief summary of the whole story, and they get far enough where they describe kind of the makeup of the Republic, meaning Athens, which we just went through and showed how there's lots of problems. And then they go into the whole background of what Atlantis is as the opposite of the Republic, Athens. But then right when things are about, they're about to describe how this war starts and all this kind of stuff, it just suddenly gets cut off, and we don't have any more. And we don't know if it's because it was not recorded by a scribe or whether it was just never finished.
Just a reminder, everybody, super chats will definitely get you your question asked. But I just saw one here from Logan. He didn't do a super chat, but I thought it's worth asking. What do you make of the fact that he got the story from Solon, who got it from the Egyptians, who themselves talk about coming from a place like Atlantis?
I don't think that matters at all, because this is a fictional dialogue. The four characters in this dialogue, Critias, Timaeus, Hermocrates, and Socrates, there's no way they could have ever spoken together. Hermocrates and Socrates did not live at the same time, and nor was Hermocrates ever in Athens for such a dialogue. So the entire setup is fictional. It's a fictional dialogue. And then within that, they say that the stories we're about to say are all fictional. We're trying to continue this allegory. This is going to end in a minute. And so I'm not so worried about how they set that up, because they tell us before that this is philosophical allegory. Yeah. You should send me another link, because this is about to get cut off.
Oh, you got a note too? Okay.
Yeah, it says less than a minute.
Okay. I'm going to send you another link right now. And while you go off, I'm going to answer. I'm going to respond one more time to. I'm going to respond myself to the same question.
Yeah, I'll be back.
Okay, sounds good. So, I guess I have to schedule another meeting. So, Logan, also the Egyptians don't mention anything about Atlantis. It's said in the story itself that they do, but in Egypt itself, we don't have that. So it's not. Yeah, it's not. Somebody may have mentioned that. As a matter of fact, I did do a video on this. The video is called. It's called. It's about the Temple of Edfu. Anyway, look at it. It's about Atlantis and the Temple of Edfu. I can't remember the exact title, but yeah. So yeah, there isn't anything in Egypt about that. Okay, so let me. I'm gonna DM him the new link. Okay, and now he should be entering again. So we'll get that going in a second. But in the meantime, let's talk to some of you fine folks. Okay. Glenn, I don't know. I've seen a few comments about people being rude. I hope people aren't being too rude, but you seem to have things under control. All right. Is anything in here about Atlantis? Fable more than thought experiment, like any precautionary tale. Yeah. Above Plato's Academy, where the words "only geometers enter," John Mitchell outlines the sacred geometry problems. Let's see. Any other questions here? Flint, I did send you the new link. I sent it to you. Oh, wait. Do I have to admit him? Oh, I have to start the meeting. Yes, of course. Let's see if he's in there. So I see him. No, he's not here yet. He's not in here yet. I did send you the link, Flint. I sent you the link. Oh, you guys can all still see my Zoom meeting there. That's all right. He'll be on in a second. Hi, David, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. Well, glad to have some Aussies here. Jesse, thank you so much for that super chat. Very generous. No question, just saying thank you for doing what you do. Awesome, Jesse. Greatly appreciated. Flint is still not in here. I sent him a new link. I sent him the new link. I don't know why he's not in here yet. All right. Well, anyway, give him another minute. I love how in a previous video you pretty much called Brian Forster a very misinformed tourist. I don't like calling people names. My latest Brian Forster video, I was a little bit harsher because he made me mad. But yeah. I'd like my questions answered, but it is being ignored because it doesn't fit the narrative. Todd, you can definitely get your question answered with a super chat, but I just didn't see your other one. I was talking to Flint. No offense intended. Where did you send it? Oh, I sent it to your Twitter, Flint. to your Twitter DM. It's the second link that I sent to your Twitter DM. Should be there. Oh, no, I didn't. I sent it to somebody else's DM. Whoops. Okay, there you go, Flint. I sent it to Glenn. I sent it to your DM. Sorry about that. Okay, let's admit Flint right now. Here he comes. Well, he should be. I hear you now, Flint.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, there we go. Let me fix the framing here. There we go. All right, you're back.
I am back.
Sorry about that. It's weird. I swear I've done longer sessions. I thought with two people you don't have an hour time limit, but anyway.
Well, we're here. It's fine.
Yeah, so what were we talking about?
I don't know now.
We were talking about the Egyptians, yes. The thing about that is, when it mentions that Solon went to Egypt, there is a legend that he went to Egypt, is there not? Although we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's some ideas, but does that even matter? Like, we don't know much about Solon at all. Everything we know about Solon is legend. If you see what I mean, it comes from drinking songs, and so it's not like when Solon was around, we have a detailed history of Athens. We don't. It's still very much proto-history, and so I just don't know how to make much of that, because everything about it's like what early on in the show somebody was asking, well, how can you deal with religious texts where there's no external corroboration? And that's what a lot of Solon is like, right? And so we don't have much external corroboration for much about Solon at all. And so there's not much we can make from that.
Yeah. Now let's switch into the subject of pseudoarchaeology in general. I did a video on pseudoarchaeology recently, where I kind of wanted to make the point that pseudoarchaeology is about what you do or fail to do, rather than what your beliefs are. Because a lot of people just say, oh, you just call anything you disagree with pseudoarchaeology. But that's not true, right? We don't call anything we disagree with pseudoarchaeology, because there are a lot of alternate ideas out there, right? Even in the scholarly world, that we take very seriously, and we don't call pseudoarchaeology. So what, in your opinion, as an archaeologist, makes something pseudo?
I mean, now I'm wondering if I should call some of my colleagues I disagree with pseudo-archaeologists. No, I'm joking. I think what makes something pseudo-archaeology is... It's an interesting way to think about it, because some of the things we think of as pseudo-archaeology are actually ideas that archaeologists like 100 years ago had. And so the archaeological community played around with the idea, and then we uncovered more evidence, we poked at it, and then we disproved it. And then the field moved on. And so Atlantis is one of these things. A number of these things are this sort of thing. And a lot of them were developed kind of about 100 in the 19th century. And so I think that's at the core of a lot of what pseudo-archaeology is stuff from the 19th century that is really clearly not true. It does not match the nuts and bolts of the archaeological evidence, but for some reason it still has a life in pop culture. And some of it comes from fiction. So you could think of things like Aliens and Archaeology. That's a good example of something that, I think it probably has its origin in fiction, in a sense, and then people pass it over and it becomes more pseudo-archaeology, as people are saying it's real. And you could think some of these odder new theories that are taking over conspiracy communities like Tartaria and the mud flood and stuff like that. I think some of that stuff comes out of early 20th century Russian fiction. And so I would say things that either come from 100-year-plus ideas that have since been debunked, or from fiction, and then therefore people are trying to apply. I'd go with another alternative, which is grand unifying theories, that kind of stuff. If you think that every single archaeologist is wrong on everything, then that's obviously not pseudo-archaeology. I'm going to disagree with my colleagues on specific things, but by and large we agree because the majority of the evidence is there for us to see, and we've all seen it all, right? Or not all of it, but we've all seen the cord. We've been to the Acropolis. We've seen painted statues. We've seen, the publications of animal bones or potsherds or lithics. We've seen the photos of them and the drawings. And so there's a lot of agreement, and we disagree on very minor things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sometimes,
it's a good question.
Yeah, sometimes people who like the pseudoarchaeology will say, well, you archaeologists ignore the evidence that the ones you're calling pseudoarchaeologists present. They show you an artifact and they say, look, this was clearly cut by modern machinery or something like that. Do you think archaeologists are ignoring evidence?
Not at all. Not at all. There are so many archaeologists out there. We are trying to actually actively bring in more evidence, new methods, new types of things to study. I mentioned how there aren't many people that study animal bones in ancient Greece. So I'm trying to bring in new evidence that people have overlooked in the past. We are not ignoring evidence at all. We are certainly ignoring a false claim that this must have been cut by modern technology, because we know of traditional ways of cutting stone in very straight lines and making clear angles. We know that can traditionally be done because it's been done experimentally, and we have records of it done ethnographically by traditional technology. And so, and we're not ignoring things. I saw somebody bring up the idea that Atlantis is related to Aslan. But we're not ignoring that. We just know that there's no evidence for connections between the Americas and Europe and the Mediterranean and Africa that early. We have zero evidence for such a connection. We don't have material being traded. We don't have isotopic evidence of an organism, whether a plant, an animal, or a human, that has moved between those continents. We do these kind of tests all the time, this kind of isotopic evidence, and we do sourcing of stones and potsherds and things like that all the time. And we have no evidence for those kind of connections. So it's not that we're ignoring that, it's that we know that there's no evidence for it.
Yeah. And also I think I'd like to add to that people should keep in mind that when someone presents one or artifact, for example, and say, oh, see, this is a game changer right here, and they're not looking at all the other evidence, then they're the ones that are ignoring the evidence, right? Like, if you're hyper-focused on just the things that fit your theory and you're not taking into account everything, right, you're going to draw wrong conclusions.
And that's also, I think, a key point here, which I brought up in my original Twitter thread on Atlantis, is the aspect of context. And so, I firmly believe that archaeology is something that everybody can get involved in one way or another, without a doubt. But archaeology is not a thing where you should be dipping into a book and saying, this photograph of this artifact, and then you dip into another book, looks like that photograph of that artifact, because you're ignoring the larger context within which those photographs were placed in these books. Mm-hmm. And so that's why there's plenty of great people that do archaeology outreach or that do even real archaeology in the field that don't have a degree. But at the same time, you do need to engage with the context of this kind of stuff. If you just start to throw it out, you're going to find all kinds of connections that are very meaningless, because just because two things look similar does not mean they're related. We know that from biology. It's called convergent evolution. It's the same kind of thing in material culture and archaeology. Mm-hmm. And so we can then, if you're going to say that this pottery designed from one place, place A, looks like pottery designed from another place, place B, well, you need to demonstrate why that potsherd in place A and how it relates to all the other potsherd designs in place A before you can start talking about a relationship to place B. Because we actually have that context of evidence there, and I guarantee that that's already been argued and developed and made fairly clear, maybe with some minor disagreements by scholars, but the larger context is the same. And so it's that context that's really key, and it's where I think training and education is important, but you can also definitely do that yourself. I know people that do that, but you can't go in and take the idea that archaeologists are all wrong and then start holding two pictures up next to each other, because you're just ignoring the context.
Mm-hmm.
You're ignoring the fact that I've been in the field and I've spent years of my life digging through and handling pottery. I know what this pottery looks like. I've gone through and handled personally in my hands hundreds of thousands of pots. And so I have a sense of this kind of stuff just from hands-on interaction. And I've been to, 150 museums in Greece going through them. And so, not all of them are in that book you're looking at. And so, but that stuff's open for people. People can go visit these sites. They can go to these museums and get that context and read that context. But you should be working with us, not against us, right? We want to work with the public. I work with amateurs and enthusiasts all the time, whether it's on social media or in the field. Some of the best excavators, some of the most interested people I know are people I'd classify as amateurs and enthusiasts, and they're fantastic. And so there's ways to work with scholars instead of against us.
Yeah, also kind of related to that, sometimes I'll get the accusation that archaeologists don't consult with people in other professions, that the work is not interdisciplinary. Is that true?
No, I publish with geologists, I publish with climatologists, I publish with historians, I publish with people in a wide range of disciplines. If you go look at my bibliography online, pretty much every article I've ever published where I'm a co-author on it is with people from other disciplines. And so, archaeology in my mind, what I love about archaeology is just how collaborative it is. I tend to think that archaeology is the one discipline in the world where it actually can collaborate with pretty much any other discipline. You could be a computer scientist, and if you came on my excavation, we could start thinking about ways you could develop software for us. You could be a biologist. I'll sit you down with some animal bones, and we can start thinking about how to ask questions that would relate to biology of them. You can be interested in geology, or you could be interested in philosophy. You could be interested in language. You could be interested in pretty much medicine, astronomy, any field you can think of. You could find a place for it in archaeology, because archaeology is the study of humans in the prehistory and history, and the study of how humans relate to the world around them. And so it's all of our knowledge that we have can be applied to it. Like I mentioned to you before, even comparing it to textual sources, how people build narratives, right?
Mm-hmm.
That can be a study that we can start thinking about how you can relate that to archaeology. And so, but the trick is I think you want to do that alongside archaeologists, just like we do it alongside we collaborate with people from other fields. Yeah.
I want to read a few trolling comments just to see what you think of them. So how about this? That collaboration is an illusion, only works while results go along with pre-narratives of interest. I think.
I understand, because when I work on projects, guys, where we're excavating a new site, right? So we don't have a narrative, and half the time we have a hypothesis, we end up disproving it, right? So I've done this all the time. So my PhD was on this large assemblage of animal remains from this really cool site in southwest Greece called Mykoria. And it was a famous site. These animal bones were studied by a paleontologist before there were zooarchaeologists in Greece in the 1970s. And there's this really cool change that happens where in the Bronze Age, people at the site are focused primarily on sheep and goat. And then in the early Iron Age, right at the time of the Homeric, stories and whatnot, it shifts to more cows. And so this guy wrote this narrative about how the Greeks become more pastoralist after the collapse of the palaces into the early Iron Age, what used to be called the Dark Ages in Greece, right? So you think about it, there's these palaces that collapse, the landscape opens up, and people become pastoralists, right? And so my goal was to understand this phenomenon. This was the kind of this was the hypothesis of how the economy in Greece changed between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. And I was going to go apply new methods to studying these bones, because the study of animal bones has advanced a lot. We look at ages in more detail. We look at patterns in different kinds of ways. And I was going to understand better this pastoralist economy of the early Iron Age. And if you look at my proposals for funding You look at my proposals for my dissertation proposal. That was one of the big goals of my dissertation. I sat down and I started studying this material, and I realized that the earlier guy had actually just gotten everything not wrong. Cattle bones become more numerous in the early Iron Age layers, but the reason why was because the bones were very poorly preserved. And so I was like, what's going on here? So you think about it, the bones are poorly preserved. Some of them start disappearing because of like more acidic soil. And so cattle, being larger bones, survive better, which is why they end up being proportionally more common in the early Iron Age. So I then had to go to a geologist and say, all right, I need you to explain to me what's going on with this. So I got him some soil samples, and he then analyzes the soil samples, and he sits down and he starts to explain how soil formation over time, the early Iron Age, is over the late Bronze Age. So you might think that older stuff is preserved worse. Well, actually, it was the rainfall and the elements on the site. It gets abandoned in the early Iron Age, which then causes the upper layers to be worse preserved than the lower layers. And so I'm not really going into this, even if I have a preconceived narrative, I'm disproving it all the time when I find new evidence that supports a better narrative. And this is now all published. I have 2 articles on this. You can go look them up. If you need me to share them, I'm happy to send me a message on ResearchGate or something like that. And me collaborating with the geoarchaeologist, sort of saying, well, okay, can you study the soil? And if you find a pattern, can you start to explain it? And he said, well, I can try. And so he found in micromorphology, so the soil was sort of saved with unwashed animal bones, and we took it, we put it in resin, we solidified it in resin, and then we sliced through it with a saw. We created a microscopic slide that you can then put it in a microscope and study the sort of arrangement, and you can do different things like Fourier transform infrared on the soil to understand sort of how much bone material is embedded in the soil. Is there dissolved bone material in there? You can see how acidic it is. You can see how much calcium carbonate is in it. These are the kinds of questions I'm interested in. I don't have a friggin' preconceived notion that like I'm wed to. I'm sitting there looking at new material that people have either not looked at in 40 years and has been ignored, or I'm going to new sites, new excavations like at Athens, where I'm looking at stuff people have not studied, and I'm looking at butchery methods and how butchery changes over time with regards to the development of a city. So urbanism, the change in what people are eating, and this kind of stuff. I'm open to whatever the pattern shows, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. I'm mostly looking at really what you might think is less interesting than pseudoarchaeology, but I can tell you there's some damn cool things. How many people knew that the ancient Greeks ate dog? Every single site I've ever studied has a lot of butchered dog bones. And in Athens, where I have a lot of butchered dog bones, and I map out in 3D butchery marks on bones, I can tell you that they ate the same cuts of dog as they ate the same cuts of pork. So they butchered dogs and pigs in the same way. And what does that have to do with Atlantis or aliens? It's just kind of cool, right? Or there's this well in Athens. There's this well from Hellenistic Athens, and it's full of 450 dead human infants and 150 dead dogs. And for a long time, people thought that it was excavated in the 1930s. And so they thought maybe this is an evidence of human sacrifice in Athens. So this it was a debate, nobody knew. Some colleagues of mine went down and they finally studied these bones, the human remains of these poor dead infants and the dog remains. Turns out that what this is infant mortality. In a pre-modern society, a lot of people died when they were infants, and people had to do something with those infants. And so this well was a designated spot to this is where people were burying their dead children that passed away within just a few days of childbirth. And to be able to expiate the sort of the miasma is what you call it in ancient Greek religion of this kind of thing. When you have a dead child, they would take street dogs and they would sacrifice them. And so that's what's going on in that kind of well. And it gives you this sort of everyday picture of life and death in the past, and just the kind of anguish and heartache that it would take to deal with this kind of stuff, that you're going to go and, I guess, capture a street dog and sacrifice it.
Wow.
And so, life in the past was not easy, and I'm looking at these kind of things.
Yeah.
And I'm not sitting there trying to put together some grand narrative. I'm trying to look at what people were doing and how it's totally fascinating and interesting, because they had a real lived experience. It's very different from our own.
Stacy Walpole, thank you for the super chat. Another question here. We kind of touched a little bit on this earlier, but the question is, similar to various searches that, quote unquote, prove Atlantis at a location, how do you feel about archaeologists and historians searching for evidence to prove their ideas in myth or religion?
Yeah, so we don't go and do that in the same way. Not anymore, at least. Certainly early archaeologists were into, all right, can we find Troy and prove Troy and the Trojan War and stuff like that? We now realize that it doesn't have a one-to-one correspondence, things like mythology, right? And so instead, what we're more intrigued to understand is the relationship between mythology and the archaeological record. And so that can take the form of, I mentioned early on, trying to look at how the material culture, armor, weapons, the ways animals are treated, the way that human relationships are described in mythology, and how that relates to our kind of evidence in the past, and what that tells us about the composition and the reception of this kind of myth. One of my pet theories that I have, for example, if you think about the Iliad and the Odyssey, is they're always feasting on huge amounts of cows. They have these huge barbecues, right? And so that actually, remember how I mentioned that Nicoria site with all those cattle in the Iron Age? They like to connect that to Homer. They're like, these were cowboys, just like these Homeric cowboys, right? Turns out that cattle was not, that was all preservation based. Instead, our isotope evidence on human bones, which tells us about what people were eating, shows that in the Iron Age, people ate very little meat. So you can imagine you're hearing this poetry, this myth about people sacrificing hundreds of cows and eating all the beef and burgers and steaks that you can eat, and they're getting no meat. So it's kind of, I like to think of it as like food porn. It's like a fantasy to them. And then on the other hand, 400 years later in classical Athens, where people we know are eating a lot more meat, we know it from the isotopes in their bones, and they're bringing up hundreds of animals right up here and sacrificing them and slaughtering them and sharing them with their fellow citizens and their families and things like that. We can tell that this sort of Homeric myth that was written down by that point, it forms the basis of this kind of religion. And so they're almost seeing a different echo of themselves in this myth than what their ancestors 500 years earlier, who were not getting much meat, were seeing when they heard these stories. So that's the kind of questions we can start to look at. It's not like, whoa, Trojan War and this kind of League of Cities, that kind of stuff. We just know that that's not how things were, because we've had a lot of people look at that a whole lot, and we've realized that it doesn't match up. There's not a one-to-one relationship between myth and the archaeological record. It's more complicated, and in that way also more interesting.
Todd Smith, basically everything that you're typing has been addressed. I think you're, instead of paying attention to Flint talking, you're more interested in typing your comments and things that he's already addressed. So kind of interesting. Anyway, we're running out of time, Flint. But if people want to find out more about you, if they want to see some of your videos, where can they go? Yeah,
so I have a YouTube. Just look for Flint Dibble on YouTube. I will keep putting up real archaeology videos on there about my research and my teaching. And you can check me out on Twitter, Flint Dibble on Twitter. I have a lot of Twitter threads. That's where I do most of my outreach. I want to do more videos, but it takes more time. But I'm always keen to share real archaeology with the public. Wait, let me type in the link to my 2 Atlantis threads if people want to read about Atlantis and the more depth about what I've argued here, sort of briefly, orally. And I have a brief thread on the pyramids, which I can put in the chat as well. So just give me a second.
Yeah. Thank you, Flint. Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on and talking with us today. And your work on prehistoric Greece sounds really interesting, too. Everybody, thank Flint for coming, give him some thumbs up or some claps or whatever.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for the super chats and for coming by today and engaging with us. Oh, Michael, thank you very much for the super chat. If Dr. Dibble has any lit source for Greek dog barbecue, I would love to see it. Never mind Atlantis,
No.
that's old hat. I want to know about
Well,
dogs.
there's only one literary source to eating dogs, and it's like a medical source about eating puppies, and that's it. But every single big assemblage of animal remains that I've studied has quite a number of butchered dog bones, like at least a few, if not more. And so yeah, there's not much literary sources on that, and that's why I think archaeology is so interesting, because even in such a literary period, we can find new stuff just from these kind of animal bones.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming by. We'll have to have you on again sometime. Thank you everybody for coming to and chatting with us today. We'll have another live stream soon. I have some new videos coming out you're gonna love. But thank you. I appreciate you all being here. Have a great day, everybody. And thank you, Will, for yours. We don't have... Okay, maybe one more.
Okay, fine. Why do people think they want pseudo-art history to be true? If evidence for Atlantis were found, they would want something else to be true. Yeah. So I think there's an innate sort of thing where people, especially in today's world, but always, where people sometimes want experts to be wrong. And so there's that aspect, and people make money off of this, right? You know, people make money selling books, hosting big YouTube channels, making TV series. Mm-hmm. And so there's always going to be an interest there. And then at the same time, some of this stuff is just too good to be true, you know? Like, people like too good to be true stories. Mm-hmm. It's something that we all like. It's why we read fiction, after all. And at the same time, it's just something that will always draw us in. I mean, I still like the idea. Some of this stuff is interesting ideas, but it's just not, we don't have evidence for it. And some people are willing to I guess, just only look to one source and take it at face value, mm-hmm. whether it's a poor YouTube channel or a TV series, and they see this grand thing, and then they say, oh, now I know better. And then it just moves on from there, and it's a real problem in today's world, I find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Yeah.
Have a great day, everybody.